Chapter 4. Rarely a day goes by when the American public is not assaulted by news of some heartbreaking event or newly revealed problem involving the nation's young. Because formal education is so much a part of their lives, many of the youth related issues and problems spill over and affect our schools and classrooms. This chapter explores some of the most sensitive and controversial issues in American education. In such a small place, we can treat each topic only briefly, but we urge you to pursue additional reading on each issue. As we discussed in the previous chapter, when students enter the classroom each morning, they carry with them experiences that impact their physical, social, emotional, and academic development. The paths our students take each morning before stepping foot in the school building may be different based on their race, class, gender, socioeconomic status, or other sources of diversity. It is unfortunate that the world many school-age children experience outside of the school is tumultuous and even dangerous. It is likely that some of these students bear deep scars from their past experiences and that some are currently caught up in desperate, widespread social problems. We wish to make you more fully aware of and more deeply sensitive to the sorts of problems your students may bring to your classroom. Although many of the troubles and pathologies discussed in this chapter, such as drug use, cheating, and school violence, appear typically among secondary school students, most all have their roots in the lives of elementary school students. All teachers, therefore, need to be alert to these problems. We are not suggesting that you should be Mr. or Mr. Fix-It, taking in troubled children with a few quick adjustments to their psyches, sending them out into the world cured. We do, however, want you to recognize the stabilizing power of education, which gives structure, purpose, and hope to youngsters whose daily lives often lack these stabilizing and motivating influences. Chapter 3, Who Are Today's Students in a Diverse Society? Profile changes in our society that are resulting in increased diversity among today's students. These conditions affect many students' lives, but they do not necessarily negatively affect their academic achievement. Other changes or trends in this society do pose a more direct threat to a student's opportunity to succeed in school. Many teachers may have difficulty recognizing and adapting to differences that contribute to the problems some children bring to the classroom. Because unlike many of their students, most teachers come from relatively risk-free backgrounds. Although a teacher's stable background can be a source of strength, it means that students often inhabit different worlds than their teachers. Often there are striking gaps between teachers and students' social class and their personal exposure to major social problems. In our discussion here, we deal with several difficult conditions and problems, including poverty, homelessness, child abuse, alcohol, and drug use, teenage parenting, sexually transmitted diseases, adolescent suicide, violence, cheating, and school dropout rates. These pervasive societal problems do not occur in isolation, but rather tend to cluster or overlap. In real life, it is difficult to separate out discrete sources of social problems. The compounding of risk factors contribute to the incredible scope of these problems and places a number of students at risk for not completing or succeeding in school. Figure 4.1 illustrates the most prevalent risk factors for young children. For such students at risk, as they are often called, the chances are great that they will have difficulty getting an adequate education. What are some of these risk factors? Here are 7 major ones affecting students in today's schools. A household without English-speaking adults, a family with more than 4 children, parents without a high school degree, a change in residences one or more times in a year, single parenthood, a teen mother, unemployed parents. We know that these risk factors do not necessarily predetermine student success in school. Many children from families with these risks overcome the odds to succeed in school and in life. Research indicates, however, that when several of these risk factors are present, fewer children make it. As one prominent author states, the research shows that the more risk factors are present, the greater the damaging impact of each. But the impact is not just additive. Risk factors multiply each other's destructive effects. Compounding the problem is the fact that multiple risk families are often concentrated in economically and socially isolated communities that have limited job opportunities, poor schools, low quality public services, and higher levels of crime and drug use. Let's examine some of these risk factors in more detail, starting with the changing patterns of the American family. In recent decades, our society has experienced dramatic changes in how families are structured. The once common image of the breadwinner father, a housewife mother, and two children of public school age now accurately describes only a very small percentage of households in the U.S. So, what is the typical family of our students like today? Actually, there is no longer one typical family pattern. Rather, a number of economic and societal trends have resulted in families that come in many forms and, in turn, have pervasive influence on children in school. An increasing number of children are being raised in families different that the traditional typical family. Over the past 50 years, the following 5 major trends have been identified as factors that are statistically changing family structures. More unmarried parents raising children, more gay and lesbian couples raising children, more single motherhood, more mothers working outside the home, and more interracial marriages. These trends are seen across the entire population. However, there are trends that are more prevalent for different demographic groups. For example, marriage remains the status quo for adults with a college education. 56% of white adults are married, whereas 32% of African American adults are married. There is also a striking difference between single mothers across racial groups. 72% of single moms are African Americans, 53% are Hispanic, and 29% are white. The changing demographic of families over the past 50 years is partly due to adults delaying marriages until an older age and partly our nation's high divorce rate. The divorce rate has tripled from the rate in the 60s. In addition to divorce, factors such as birth to single parents, separation, and death of a parent contribute to the number of children living in a single-parent household or possibly with grandparents or aunts and uncles. Being a child in a family in which the parents' marriage is conflict-ridden and unhappy may be less preferable in some ways than living in a single-parent family. Nevertheless, single-parent families have one major disadvantage relative to two-parent households: lower incomes. 48% of children living in female-headed households live in poverty, while 11% of children in married couple families live in poverty. Single-mother families have been called the new poor. It is not just the absence of one parent, but also the loss of a two-parent income that puts a special burden on these families. More difficult to pin down is the effect of only one parent bearing the daily chores of monitoring, supporting, and guiding school-age children. Another result of high divorce rate is the increasing number of children living in blended families with step-parents, step-siblings, and/or half-siblings. In some cases, divorced parents share physical custody of the children, with the results that children must split their time between parental households. As we discussed in Chapter 3, Who Are Today's Students in a Diverse Society, you may also have students whose parents are of the same gender. Changes in American family patterns will likely influence your interactions with students and their families in a number of ways. For example, in divorce situations, it may be difficult to keep both parents informed of their child's progress, or a single parent may have a very heavy workload and may be unable to attend parent-teacher conferences at the usual times. Varied family patterns will also require more sensitivity in daily interactions, such as avoiding asking students to bring a note from your mother. It would perhaps be better to say your parent or the person who takes care of you. In the Voices from the Classroom feature, Krista Compton shares some of the ways she tries to create a supportive community within her classes. My students show up with hearts burdened by terrible losses. Angela's father was murdered when she was very young, and she still grieves for a man she only vaguely remembers. Marcus was put up for adoption at birth by his teenage mother, and his adoptive mother died of cancer 2 years ago. Peter is angry because his mother recently moved out of the house, and he blames her for breaking up their family. Many other families have been torn apart by divorce, and fathers are increasingly absent in their child's lives. All of this means I have to work hard to earn students' trust, an especially difficult task with those who have been disappointed by other people they have trusted. If students don't find a sense of belonging at home, it becomes even more important to find it at school, so I try to create a supportive community within the class. I uncover the story of each kid's life and design activities that build relationships among the students. Throughout the year, we write sympathy cards when one of us is grieving, applaud the students who make the honor roll, welcome back the students who return from an absence, and do whatever we can to express concern for each class member. It helps to observe the students' behavior and moods from day to day. Sometimes just a quiet comment can reassure them that someone cares. At other times, students reveal their anxieties in a written assignment, so I write notes on their papers to let them know that I am there to support them. They desperately want someone to pay attention, to praise their successes, to notice when they're sad, to share their daily torments and victories. That are the hallmarks of adolescent life. When they feel dismissed, I can provide encouragement. When their lives are chaotic and unpredictable, I can offer safety and consistency. I might be the one person they can count on, and I refuse to let them down. Family composition affects the amount of time children and their parents have to spend with one another, and can also affect the quality of that together time. For a single parent, the combination of job demands and the necessities of maintaining a family, such as cooking, cleaning, and grocery shopping, does not allow for a great deal of leisure time to spend supervising and enjoying the children. Many single parents do a fine job of raising their children, but the hardships are considerable. Even two-parent families can face challenges. Many mothers now go to work or return to work when their children are very young. In approximately 60% of two-parent families, both the mother and father works all year full-time. Two-career families must balance the needs of child rearing and family life with the demands of two work environments. Neither mom nor dad is as available as she or he used to be to attend daily to children's social, intellectual, and moral development. Of these working parents, over half report that they find it difficult to balance work and family responsibilities. With so many dual-career communities, many children return home from school and watch television rather than talk with their parents. Coming home to an empty house or apartment after school is standard for an estimated 4 million latchkey children in our country. For parents of younger children not yet in school, working outside the home raises the issue of adequate child care. If both parents are the only parent goes to work full-time, who is taking care of the children? Grandparents and extended family used to pitch in and help, but today it is less common for a family to settle in one location near relatives for extended periods. Parents who have to work, and especially single parents, can easily be caught in a bind, and they often must settle for whatever child care they can find or afford. The expenses of child care often create an additional hardship on the family's resources. In addition to limiting the amount of time children spend in close contact with their parents, the trend towards two-career and single-parent families has a direct impact on the schools. In the past, teachers could count on more support from families. Now, teachers often find it difficult to even get in contact with many parents. In the past, young people were actively involved outside of school in family and community. Today, however, the school is being urged to play a larger role in expanding and guiding the limited experiences of children and to connect with families of all students. As we discussed in Chapter 3, who are today's students in a diverse society, you will also want to be sure to be aware of what languages are spoken in your students' homes. Often schools will provide translators to help you communicate with parents who speak a language other than English. It will be important for you to consider working schedules, language barriers, and other social issues as you attempt to build connections from the classroom to the home. The more dramatic social problems, such as poverty and homelessness, take on even greater urgency for the schools than work schedules. Schools are being asked to deal with the new problems that reflect the facts of modern family life and our changed economy. Many schools have responded to child care needs by offering both before and after school programs. For example, schools may offer enrichment and recreational programs or on-site daycare before and after school to address students and parental needs. Some schools even stagger their bus schedules to accommodate students who stay for after-school programs. Many schools provide both breakfast and lunch programs. Many schools today hire school social workers, sometimes called family specialists, to help support students' academic and social success. School-based social workers work with teaching teams to identify students who have family factors that may impact their success in school. They help to provide support in the school and identify referral services that will also support the child. A school social worker may help coordinate transportation for parents to attend school meetings or for a homeless student to come to school. The school social worker may coordinate a school supply donation or food donation and help distribute the supplies or food to students in need. The school social worker also works with outside agencies to make referrals and to maximize outside resources that can be used to support the whole child in the school. Some schools, such as those following the model developed by James Comer described the Leaders in Education feature, have responded in a very different way by redesigning the whole school to make effective teamwork with families a priority. leaders in education. James Comer is a public health physician and psychiatrist who, through his work with low-income schools in New Haven, Connecticut, has shown that by fostering the social, emotional, and academic needs of children, it is possible for all students, especially low-income students, to achieve high academic success. After receiving his MD from Howard University in 1960, Comer entered the public health service. He became interested in the study of how policies and institutions interact with families and children, and began to see the school as the place to improve the life chances for children from difficult home situations. Comer decided that a career in psychiatry would enable him to address the social problems that plagued the people with whom he worked. And in 1964, he began his psychiatric training at Yale University. At Yale, Comer worked with the inner-city New Haven schools to find out why they were not helping low-income children, specifically African-American children, and how could they be made to do so. He wanted to give these children the same opportunities in life that education had given him. The more he worked with children, the more he came to believe that schools were the only places where children trapped in poverty and failure could receive the support their families could not give them. With the help of a Ford Foundation grant, Comer became the director of the school development program with the New Haven Public Schools. A team of educational and mental health professionals consisting of Comer school administrators and teachers, a social worker, a psychologist, a special education teacher, and other support staff worked to involve parents in a developing social skills curriculum that integrated academic disciplines. The curriculum included 4 major areas: politics and government, business and economics, health and nutrition, and spiritual and leisure time. All areas in which the students would need proficiency to succeed in school and to lead productive lives. Through the curriculum, the students became more aware of their community and of how their involvement in it could make a difference. By adopting the findings of child development and behavioral science research, the team concentrated on problem solving rather than blame fixing, and made decisions based on consensus. This consensus project gave each team member a sense of participation and ownership of decisions. The project was a great success. Student standardized test scores rose dramatically. Project schools had higher attendance rates than other New Haven schools, and students graduated to become school leaders in their later schooling. Comer's model emphasizes the social context of teaching and learning. No academic learning is possible. Comer asserts unless a positive environment exists at the school such that teachers, students, parents, and administrators like one another and work together for the good of all children. But around 3 elements: a school governance team, a mental health team, and parental participation, Comer's model seeks to create schools that offer children stable support and positive role models. With the school and parents working successfully together, no conflict arises between home and school. The students learn desirable values, disruptions at school are reduced, and both teachers and students have more time and energy to focus on academic and social skills learning. The Comer School Development Program has partnered with over 1,000 schools across the nation to implement the Comer program into the schools. They continue today to partner with schools to promote educating the whole child. They also partner with colleges and universities to integrate their program into teaching education programs. In addition to developing their own responses, many schools work with other agencies to meet the changing needs of students and their families. These schools offer non-traditional programs that coordinate agencies dealing with health, social, and recreational services. The interagency programs enable the schools to deliver needed social and health services to students and their families to promote success in school. For example, the Coordinated School Health Initiative responds to the risk factors that threaten children and youth by providing students health services. It assesses the health problems in particular school communities, builds consensus on which services should be provided, and puts together a comprehensive approach to improving children's health, using agencies that address health, mental health, dental health, social services, recreation, and youth development. The guiding principle for the Coordinated School Health Initiative is that schools and communities can do much more with their current resources if they work together in partnership rather than as separate, isolated agencies. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. This aphorism describes the extremes of different socioeconomic levels in our society today. Socioeconomic status is the term used by the U.S. Census Bureau to classify economic conditions of people using a family occupational status, income, and educational attainment as measure of status. Individuals high in income, occupational prestige, and amount of education are considered to be high in socioeconomic status and are usually seen by others to be upper-class people who are influential in their communities. In contrast, people low in socioeconomic status are seen as being lower-class people who have little prestige or power. In 2012, the number of impoverished Americans was estimated to be 46.5 million, or 15% of the total U.S. population. For children 18 and younger, the poverty rate was 21.8%. The percentage of the U.S. population living in poverty is the highest it has been since the mid-90s. In terms of sheer numbers, the majority of poor Americans are white. However, the rate of poverty is higher among minorities. Over 9% of whites, 27% of blacks, 25.6% of Hispanic Americans, and 11.7% of Asian Americans live below the poverty line. Poverty rates climbed high in the United States the last few years as a result of the 2007 to 2009 recession. However, there are signs that the economy is stabilizing and that number is leveling off. The problem of poverty is pervasive, and the prospects for breaking its grip on children are particularly bleak. As Figure 4.2 shows, 21.8% of U.S. children live in poverty, the highest rate among all groups and the highest rate in any industrialized country. Children make up about one-fourth of the total U.S. population, but they constitute 34.6% of the poor. More than 47.2% of the children in families headed by females are poor, as compared to 11.1% for married couple families. In the past, poverty was assumed to be the result of unemployment, and this remains true for many. 1 in 3 young people are growing up in families where one parent is employed. Over 30% of children living in poverty are growing up in a family in which at least one adult is employed full-time. After World War II, many high school graduates could get manufacturing jobs that required minimal education but paid quite well. A high school graduate could support a family of 4, buy a house, own 2 cars, and live comfortably. The U.S. job market has now changed. Many manufacturing jobs can now be done more efficiently and effectively by machines, and many of those jobs are still done by people who have been moved or outsourced to countries with low-wage workers. The U.S. job market for unskilled workers today is found mostly in the service industry, specifically in food service, that typically pay minimum wage and offer no benefits. Full-time employment at the current minimum wage is not enough to support a family above the poverty line. For families in or close to poverty, the threat of homelessness is very real. Poor families often pay more than one-half of their annual incomes in rent. With such a large percentage of income consumed by rent payments, a single incident or emergency in the family can disrupt this tenuous equilibrium and jeopardize the family's ability to maintain a home. Imagine, for example, the domino effect that could occur from mechanical difficulties with the one-family car. Even minor repairs costing $50 to $100 may be beyond the family's budget. Without a car, the family breadwinner may be unable to get to work and the children unable to get to daycare. It does not take long in such a situation to lose a job or a long-awaited slot in a child care center. If the main earner cannot work, paying rent can soon become impossible. It is easy to see why housing with such consumes so much of annual income. It is a particular source of vulnerability for families in poverty. Approximately 1.5 million children and youth in the United States are homeless at some point each year. The number of homeless school-age children has increased over 70% since 2006. Imagine the obstacles for homeless children trying to get an education. Uprooted from their homes, many live in shelters and other locations in distant parts of town. Attending school may require extensive transportation, which parents are not likely to be able to afford. Enrolling children in a school near a shelter may be a difficult and intimidating process for parents struggling with daily survival. Many parents, believing they will be homeless for only a short time, may not even try to transfer their child's enrollment. As days turn into weeks and months, the child may miss a great deal of school. If the child is fortunate enough to attend school, other difficulties may arise, such as poor health, hunger, emotional trauma, or simply being unable to stay awake in class. Some homeless children are on their own, having run away from home or been thrown out by their families. Many of these chronically homeless youth have been physically or sexually abused, and many suffer from drug or alcohol abuse, poor nutrition, inadequate sleep, exposure to the elements, and lack of health care. School can be a stabilizing force in the lives of these children, but it can also exacerbate their problems. In 1987, Congress passed the Stuart B. McKinney Homeless Assistance Act, which is intended to provide protection for the educational need of homeless children and youth. Most importantly, this policy requires each school district to establish a liaison for homeless students. This legislation permits students to remain in one school even if they temporarily live in another school district. Under this act, schools must also allow students to enroll even if they don't have the typically required forms, such as proof of residency. It also provides grants to states to make available money for the educational needs of homeless children. It also requires states to ensure that these children are educated with the rest of the youth in their area and are not isolated and stigmatized. You may have homeless children in your classroom. If so, they are likely to require support and understanding from you. Your school social worker or homelessness liaison should be able to support your efforts to ensure these children are successfully in school. Some may be malnourished or suffer from chronic health issues. They may show emotional needs. Other children may make fun of them. Your support and caring could provide these children with hope and be crucial in improving their chances for success. More than anything else, homeless children need homes. As their teacher, you cannot be expected to provide the homes they need, but hundreds of local and federal programs serve runaway and homeless youth, and these agencies will help you work with these youngsters. Through them, some may find shelter. Many people have thought that we could eliminate poverty through education and that through schooling it would be relatively easy to free people from the chains of impoverishment. The resulting efforts have been well-intentioned but often too little, too late, and in retrospect, sometimes naive. With poverty so prevalent, schools face a challenging problem, partly because they are not designed to serve poor children. The schools in the United States were created and continue to be supported by the middle class to perpetuate the middle class way of life. There is nothing particularly startling about this bias. Middle class people want their children to be like themselves, or possibly somewhat better, so they have built and continue to pay for a school system that reflects their values and supports the way of life with which they feel comfortable. Some critics see the middle class bias of our schools in a more sinister light as part of an enslavement system. They claim that schools do not help develop the individual talents and strengths of poor children, and that they make these children believe they are losers. After 8 to 11 years of schooling, many of these young people see themselves as unable to fit into the middle class and as people who, at best, will do society's menial work. Although some of these critics see this system as a conscious plan of our society, we do not. Such a cynical view suggests that teachers who are toiling in the poor urban and rural areas are either people of evil intentions or simply dupes. In our view, many of the most heroic teachers are those struggling to aid children trapped in and oppressed by poverty. Our past and present inadequacies in educating the children of the poor have tempted some to run away and devote their energies to more solvable problems. Our nation cannot follow this path. Ours is an evolving society. As a people, we are not finished with our own development. Eradicating the ravages of poverty and its withering effect on children should be at the top of our agenda as citizens of this nation and as educators. Although there are many important and solvable problems to work on, we cannot afford injustice to ignore this one. One educator, Ruby Payne, has written extensively about issues of poverty and how schools can better understand the unique needs of children of poverty. Payne describes hidden rules, unspoken clues that people in different socioeconomic groups use in decision-making. Among the middle class, work and achievement are driving forces in decision-making. In contrast, in generational poverty, the driving forces are survival, entertainment, and relationships. According to Payne, the hidden rules guiding people who live in poverty mean that relationships and entertainment are more important than achievement. Payne's major point is that unless educators understand these hidden rules that govern the behavior of those from generational poverty, they are unlikely to respond in appropriate ways. Schools tend to reflect middle-class values, which is why children from poverty backgrounds who don't know the middle class hidden rules often feel out of place. Payne suggests that for students from generational poverty to value academic learning, a significant relationship must be present, and academic tasks must be referenced in terms of relationships. This significant relationship can be with the teacher or with other students and friends. Payne cites an example of how a teacher, while working with a 17-year-old student who did not do his homework on positive and negative numbers, suggested that it would be acceptable if his friends cheated him at cards. The student was furious at the idea. The teacher insisted that the student wouldn't know whether they were cheating him because he didn't know positive and negative numbers. The student grabbed a deck of cards to show the teacher that he did know how to keep score. After this display, this teacher said, "Then you do know positive and negative numbers. I expect you to do your homework." From then on, the student did his homework regularly. Payne's work has generated considerable criticism from some in higher education for its lack of scientific, evidence-based practice. Even so, many teachers and administrators find her perspectives compelling and useful. The bad news: each year, approximately 330,000 American teenagers give birth, by far the highest teenage birth rate among the world's developed countries. The good news: since 1990, the birth rate among girls ages 15 to 19 declined from 60 to 34 births per 1,000, reaching a historic low. Despite this trend, over 300,000 babies are born to teen mothers each year, and there is a wide discrepancy by race and ethnicity and religion of the United States. Hispanic and African American teenagers are more than twice as likely to become teenage mothers. The lowest birth rates are reported in the Northeast and Upper Midwest, while southern states have the highest teen birth rates. Teenage parenting is fraught with consequences for teens, children, and society. The consequences of early parenthood for teen girls are critical. Teens who give birth are less likely than their peers to graduate from high school. They are more likely to be stuck in a cycle of poverty as they enter adulthood. Perhaps most alarming is the statistics that tell us that the children they bear have a higher chance of having poor health and not succeeding in school. The average cost of one teen pregnancy to taxpayers is $1,682. On the other hand, terminating a pregnancy through abortion has many short-term and long-term physical and sociological effects on teenage recipients themselves. Not only do teenage parents face the enormous task of juggling child rearing and employment or school, but they also must often care for a premature baby who is more likely to have health problems and possibly learning difficulties. Moreover, poverty often correlates with worse nutrition, less health care, more homelessness, and less education as compared to more advanced families. To lessen this problem, many schools are working with local health officials to ensure that pregnant teenagers receive prenatal care and parenting advice. They are also encouraging these young women to stay in school and graduate. In many cases, the schools are permitting young mothers to bring their babies with them to school. If you are planning on teaching in secondary schools, you may work with some of these young parents and should keep in mind the challenges they face. You should also give some thought to what you would do if one of your female students informs you that she is pregnant, or one of your male students tells you that he has gotten his girlfriend pregnant. Know both your legal and ethical responsibilities in these cases. If you plan to teach in an elementary school, be prepared to work with very young parents, including some who may be your own age. To prevent teenage pregnancies, many schools have established sex education programs, and some operate clinics where students can obtain birth control devices. Both of these steps, while increasingly common, remain controversial. Issues and questions of sexual behavior and sexual attitudes cut deep into the heart of their spiritual and social views for most Americans. It is hardly surprising, then, that our school efforts to educate young people frequently stir up strong passions and inspire heated debates. Although most people agree that children should be given information about sex, the controversy centers on three issues. Is the school the appropriate institution to offer such instruction? If so, should it limit instruction to strictly factual information, or should this psychological, social, health, religious, and moral aspects of sex also be included in the curriculum? Should the school emphasize abstinence-only sex education programs or offer comprehensive sex education programs? Many people argue that because sex is such an intimate topic and is closely related to religious and moral beliefs, sex education is the responsibility of the home and the church and should take place there. In addition, they question the biases built into some of the popular sex education curricula. Advocates of sex education in the schools respond that they would agree with that position if parents did, in fact, provide adequate sex information for their children. In reality, they contend the majority of parents fail to carry through on their responsibility to teach their children about sex. According to these advocates of sex education, the public school is the only institution that has access to most children over an extended period, and the responsibility must fall to the school because of the demonstrated failure of the home, church, library, and medical profession to provide effective sex education. Courts have also supported the right of state boards of education and local school boards to offer sex education in the curriculum. Preventing teenage pregnancies is a major goal of any sex education program. Besides endangering babies, early pregnancies place the future lives of great numbers of teenage girls in serious jeopardy, interrupting and often terminating their education. Despite the ability of special counseling and accommodations intended to help teenage mothers stay in school, the majority drop out, drastically diminishing their job and career opportunities as adults. Another goal of sex education is to reduce the incidence of sexually transmitted diseases. This aspect of sex education is also controversial, particularly regarding the use of condoms. An estimated 9 million Americans ages 15 to 24 are newly infected with an STD each year, with chlamydia and gonorrhea being the most commonly acquired diseases. About 48% of high school students report that before graduating, they have engaged in sexual intercourse. However, only 60% of the teenagers report using condoms the last time they had sex. Condoms, although clearly not as effective as abstinence, do provide some protection against AIDS and other STDs when used correctly. Unfortunately, many teenagers, especially if they are using alcohol or drugs, neglect to use condoms or use them incorrectly. In addition to preventing pregnancies and STDs, sex education seeks to help teenagers become sexually healthy adults. Sexual health encompasses sexual development and reproductive health, and such characteristics as the ability to develop and maintain meaningful personal relationships, appreciation of one's own body, interaction with both genders in respectful and appropriate ways, and responsible decision-making skills. Students need not only scientific information about human sexuality and prevention of pregnancy and disease, but also help to gain the self-control and strength of character needed to avoid risky and irresponsible behavior. One important form of prevention, abstinence, depends on developing the necessary self-control to handle sexual situations and feelings. Likewise, developing true respect for one's partner is an important character-related aspect of sex education. Arguments over the kind of sex education the school should offer are even more heated than the controversy about whether to offer it at all. Some support comprehensive sex education programs that, although advocating abstinence from sex outside of marriage, also provide information on contraception and disease prevention for those teens who elect to become sexually active. The comprehensive sex education approach stands in sharp contrast to the moral or religious beliefs of other participants in the debate. They would recommend an abstinence-based curriculum that teaches students to abstain from sex outside of marriage, and that neither advocates nor teaches about condom use. Advocates of the abstinence approach argue that when sex education programs teach both abstinence and the use of contraceptives, students receive a mixed message. According to these proponents, the only appropriate position for the public schools is to teach and to advocate abstinence, leaving the controversial sex education to others, such as parents, churches, and medical professionals. They argue that much of the mass media have so sexualized the world of young people that schools may be perceived as legitimizing teenage sex through advocating condoms and other devices, which sends the wrong message to students. Others believe that the spread of STDs, especially AIDS, has strengthened the position of those who argue for comprehensive sex education programs. They stand behind the view that schools should provide children with sex education that will help them understand the risks they face and how to prevent or minimize these risks. Although President George W. Bush's administration weighed in on the side of abstinence-only programs and primarily supported these kinds of programs, President Obama's administration has taken a different direction. In 2010, his administration launched a $110 million campaign that funds a range of programs, including both abstinence-only and comprehensive sex education programs. Like few other issues in the education, the what's and whens and hows of sex education are matters of deep and serious controversy in our public schools and in our culture. Rational people of good will have come to very different conclusions about what is best for students. As a teacher, you may have students in your class or school who are known to have HIV and other STDs. Is it important for you and your colleagues to know how school district policy deals with these students and the ways in which the disease can be transmitted? Safeguarding other students while also attending to the rights and needs of the student with an STD requires knowledgeable care and understanding. The education of the young brings us into contact with humanity's best impulses. Occasionally, however, we see the wreckage of its darkest and most vicious urges. For many years, the phenomenon of child abuse was known only to a small percentage of social workers and law enforcement people. More recently, we have become aware of the magnitude of this problem and the variety of forms abuse can take, including physical or mental injury, sexual abuse, neglect, treatment, and maltreatment. Because of the hidden nature of much child abuse and neglect, reliable data on it is somewhat difficult to obtain. Professionals in the field strongly suspect that most cases go unreported. Nevertheless, more than 3.4 million incidents of child abuse or neglect were reported to U.S. child service agencies in 2011. More than 75% of the victims of maltreatment suffered from neglect. More than 15% experienced physical abuse, and less than 10% were victims of sexual abuse. Parental substance abuse was reported as a major contributing factor in a child's abuse cases. Classroom teachers, law enforcement officers, and social service workers were cited as the most frequent reporters of child maltreatment. The toll that abuse and neglect take on children's physical, emotional, and psychological development is difficult to assess. Children subjected to violent treatment may sustain injuries that cause serious learning problems in school. Abused children may be withdrawn or have trouble concentrating. They suffer enormous stress and their self-esteem is low. They sometimes have excessive needs for control because they have experienced such helplessness. Also, they may be more likely to abuse their own children in the future. Classroom teachers may not directly encounter the problem of abuse very often. However, in all 50 states, educators are legally responsible for reporting suspected cases of child abuse. Teachers must be aware of potential signs of abuse and know school policy and procedures for reporting suspected abuse. Teachers need to realize that even after an abusive situation has been reported and perhaps disclosed, these children's problems in school will not suddenly end. Children who have been abused have a continuing need for emotional safety and stability, including trustworthy praise, concrete rewards, and constructive ways to control their classroom environment. They need capable adult role models who can provide varied but predictable activities and measurable classroom achievement. Many of the trends mentioned in this chapter can severely stress the functioning of families, provoking self-destructive responses in children. Substance abuse involving the use of alcohol or various other drugs is a particularly destructive response. It may be the act of either parent or children. Unfortunately, when one family member becomes entangled in substance abuse, the entire family is usually a victim. Alcohol is the most common abuse substance, and the first use of alcohol may occur at a young age, sometimes in elementary school. Historically, the greatest number of teens with alcoholism has been male students, especially those with low grades, but the gap between male and females seems to be closing. The problem with alcohol abuse among high school students is widespread. Nearly 7 out of 10 teenagers report consuming alcohol before graduating from high school. In one 2013 report, 10% of high school seniors participated in an extreme binge drinking. Teenage boys living in rural areas and white teenagers had higher rates of binge drinking than their peers. In 2012, 49% of school-aged youth had used an illicit drug before graduating from high school. Although these were lower than they were in earlier decades, student drug and alcohol abuse remains serious problems as mentioned earlier. Many child abuse and neglect cases involve parental substance abuse, which has devastating results for children. Every public school in the United States is subject to the Safe and Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act, which is now part of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. The basic purpose of these laws is to provide safe, disciplined, and drug-free environments conducive to learning by eliminating violence in and around schools and preventing illegal drug use on school property. What should you do if you suspect one of your students is using drugs or binge drinking? The most important step is to talk with the school counselor about the situation. He or she has been trained to deal with these problems and can offer you advice on both the legal aspects of the situation and ways to assist the students. Students want some level of consistency in actions, not just in words. It is quite distressing to students when other educators do nothing to address drug or alcohol abuse. Schools need clear-cut policies about how to handle alcohol and other drugs in the classroom and at school. Suicide is the third only to motor vehicle accidents and homicide as a leading cause of adolescent deaths in the United States. Each year, over 46,000 people ages 15 to 24 take their own lives. Studies of young people who have attempted suicide and those who have succeeded reveal several patterns. For every teenager who commits suicide, 100 more will try. Every year, 1 in 12 high school students attempt suicide, and 1/5 of all high school students report they have seriously considered suicide within the last 12 months. There are gender and race differences among suicide rates. Young males are 4 times more likely to die by suicide. Native American youth have the highest frequency of suicide rates. What puts young people at risk for attempting suicide? Risk factors include family violence or disruption, mental illness, unemployment, a history of substance abuse, being bullied, and stress in school or social life. To add to the tragedy, young people sometimes engage in copycat suicides. In such a cluster syndrome, a wave of adolescent suicides plagues an area. In response, hundreds of school districts now offer programs in suicide prevention. Despite the high prevalence of suicide among youth, most schools don't have a plan to prevent these deaths. Educators often have the opportunity to recognize children and youths who are suicide risks and to help them get the advice and support they need. Although suicidal behaviors are complex and the warning signs can be ambiguous or misleading, it is important to note risk factors that are associated with suicidal behavior. Mental illness and substance abuse, previous suicide attempts, firearms in the household, non-suicidal self-injury, exposure to friends or family members' suicidal behaviors, low self-esteem. Percentage of high school students who admit carrying a weapon to school, 8. Percentage of students ages 12 to 18 who report they were afraid to attack or harm at school, 5. Percentage of high school students who report having been in a physical fight in the previous year at school, 12. Percentage of children read to by a family member 3 or more times per week, 83. Percentage of high school seniors who report having used an illegal drug in the previous 30 days, 25. Percentage of students whose parents report having attended a parent-teacher conference that year, 78. Number of hours kids 8 to 18 spend watching television and playing on the computer a day, 6. Percentage of students 16 or older who work, 16. Percentage of children younger than age 18 living with 2 married parents, 65. Percentage of children and teens who are overweight, 31. Percentage of students who have disabilities and are served by federal programs, 12. Percentage of youths ages 16 to 17 who have ever been retained in a grade in their school career, 9. Factors that are known to help prevent youth suicide are family and school connectedness, reduced access to firearms, safe schools, academic achievement, and positive self-esteem. If you suspect one of your students is showing suicidal tendencies, do not try to handle the burden alone. Seek a support network of the guidance counselor, the school social worker, and/or the school psychologist. Recognizing symptoms and giving professional help for students who behave in this way may prevent their suicides and help them develop effective coping skills that they can deal with the situation. Massacre at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. 15 die. Classes canceled after teen makes social media threat. Girls arrested for planning attack a teacher day. Mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Teen stabbed to death in school fight. These headlines suggest that the United States has become a dangerous place for children. In urban areas, crime and violence from surrounding neighborhoods have spilled over into the schools, affecting children, staff, and teachers alike. In the suburbs, communities have seen some horrible examples of students killing other students. Costs resulting from vandalism or violence include expenditures for building repairs, skyrocketing premiums for liability insurance, human costs in terms of injuries to students and teachers, and in extreme cases, even death. Many teachers are injured while attempting to break up student fights or to halt robberies. Student-teacher disagreements also sometimes provoke attacks. Still, other teachers are injured not by students, rather by intruders who may be dealing drugs or who see the elementary schools as a building with little security, populated by women and children. How extensive is the problem of school violence and crime? Despite the ominous headlines, serious violent crime constitutes a small percentage of the total amount of school crime, and homicide is extremely rare. Although the number of multiple homicide events at U.S. schools has increased, and they receive national media coverage when they do occur, the chance of suffering a school-associated violent death is less than 1 in a million. Over the past 20 years, school-associated deaths have ranged from a low of 33 to a high of 63. Although school-related deaths are relatively few and have declined since 2006, many students still fear going to school because of the threatened violence. Factors such as weapon-carrying, fights, the presence of gangs, and bullying create an atmosphere of fear for many students, such that many high school students report not going to school at some point because of safety concerns. In 2011, 7% of all students in grades 9 to 12 reported being threatened or injured with a weapon, such as a gun, knife, or club during the previous 12 months while on school property. For the same year, 7% of all teachers reported being threatened with injury by a student at their school, and 4% of teachers reported being physically attacked by a student at their school. Criminal activity is often associated with gangs. Gang activity has been steadily increasing since the mid-80s. Approximately 782,000 gang members and 30,000 gangs are estimated to have been active in the United States in 2011. The number of gangs increased 12% since 2006. The current estimates are the highest since 1997. 40% of gang members are under the age of 18. Although gang members are often stereotyped as belonging to the lower class, some are children of middle-class suburban families who commit acts of vandalism, robbery, and drug dealing out of boredom or feelings of alienation from family and friends. Although most gang members are male, the number of females who are gang members in either all-female or mixed-gender gangs has grown in recent years. Gangs often display clothing, jewelry, tattoos, or graffiti that distinguish and identify their members. Children and teenagers join gang for a variety of reasons. The excitement of gang activity, peer pressure, physical protection, attention, financial gain, a sense of belonging, and sometimes because they feel ignored by the people they should be close to. Usually one or both parents. In many cases, youth are not actively discouraged from gang involvement by their parents. Often, parents are unaware that their children are engaged in gang activity. The character of gang activity has grown more violent as gangs have become increasingly more involved in dealing drugs, sex trafficking, and other criminal activities. The easy accessibility and spread of guns and the greater tendency to use extreme violence to settle disputes or to avenge even the smallest acts of disrespect have also contributed to the trend toward increased violence. How can educators minimize the negative influences of gangs? Useful actions include the following: establishing and enforcing clear codes of school conduct that stress the unacceptability of gang behavior and the prohibition of weapons. Establishing programs that stress positive youth involvement as alternative to gang memberships, assimilating gang-orientated students into the mainstream academically, socially, and through extracurricular activities, creating school programs that focus on nonviolent conflict resolution and gang prevention, taking quick, decisive actions when instances of gang activity occur on school grounds, prohibiting gang colors, insignia, and other signs of gang membership. Everyone who has attended school most likely has memories of themselves or friends of theirs being frightened by a bully. Once dismissed as kids will be kids, behavior educators are now viewing chronic teasing and bullying as dangerous social acts. Victims of bullying can social, physical, emotional, and academically. In 2011, about 28% of 12 to 18-year-old students reported having been bullied at school, and 9% reported being bullied online. Although bullying is evident from kindergarten through the 12th grade, it is most prevalent during the middle school years. Bullying happens in different forms: verbal, social, physical, and cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is a new form of bullying that is of growing concern. Cyberbullying refers to bullying conducted using electronic devices such as computers, cell phones, or tablets. It includes communication tools such as posts to social media sites, email, and text messages. Cyberbullying is noticeably different than traditional bullying in a few ways. First, cyberbullying is ubiquitous. In other words, it can take place at any time and place as long as the student has access to electronic communication. Second, through social media sites, cyberbullying potentially can be disseminated to a much wider audience than classmates in one school. Third, victims of cyberbullying don't always know their bullies in person. More and more cyberbullying bullies are victimizing peers in disparate locations. Preventing cyberbullying is primarily a matter of education and awareness. Parents and teachers need to understand the problem that the technology is involved. Becoming aware of the problem is the first step in the process of discussing with children the issue involved and bringing the problem out into the open. Bullying takes a terrible toll on children. Their schoolwork suffers, as do their physical and mental health. Physical and psychological bullying is often referred to be a contributing cause in adolescent suicide attempts. Bullying is also bad for bullies who rarely learn the consequences of their actions. A nationwide program, Bully Proof Your School, teaches children to recognize bullying and to develop ways to protect themselves, such as humor and avoidance. As part of this program, teachers and other school workers also receive training. Civility training is another popular way to reduce bullying. It focuses on teaching children how to be kind and compassionate to all people. An evaluation of several anti-bullying programs found that reduction in bullying were associated with parent training, increased playground supervision, disciplinary methods, homeschool communication, classroom rules, classroom management, and use of training videos. When a bullying problem persists, some schools have implemented zero-tolerance policies for aggressive behavior, under which they automatically suspend any student who harasses another student. By developing a heightened awareness of bullying and its negative consequences, teachers can take actions to make the school environment more hospitable and inviting for all students. Concern over school crime and violence has prompted many public schools to take measurements to reduce and prevent violence and to ensure safety in schools. In particular, concerns about keeping schools secure from outsiders have increased since the 2012 deadly shooting in Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newton, Connecticut. Schools have increasingly adopted safety measures, including the following steps: controlling business access during school hours, providing telephones in most classrooms, requiring faculty and staff to wear picture IDs, using one or more security cameras, requiring students to wear uniforms, requiring students to wear a picture's ID. The video case, Social and Emotional Development, Understanding Adolescence, shows a group of middle school boys discussing productive ways to handle stress and anger. Several aspects of school organization can contribute to students' aggression, including high numbers of students occupying a small space, imposition of routines and conformity that may anger some students, and poor building design that may contribute to the commission of violent acts. Most incidents of violence occur during transition times, that is, at the start of school, during lunch periods, or at the end of the school day. reducing crowding, increasing supervision, and instituting policies for handling disputes during these intervals can reduce the likelihood of conflicts and their resulting injuries. Students who enjoy positive interactions with faculty and staff are academically successful or participate productively in school activities are less likely to commit acts of violence. In most cases of school violence, warning signs are apparent. For example, notes, threats, journal entries, arguments, or physical fights. Teachers who are to develop close relationship with students may be in a good position to spot these signals of impending violence. Developing mechanisms for reporting threats and other warning signs of potential violence can also help schools curb these incidents. What else can schools, specifically principals, do to reduce school violence? Establish common goals for the school and elicit commitment to these goals from teachers, students, and parents. Establish a firm, fair, and consistent system for running the school. Establish high expectations for the behavior and performance of students and staff. Create a curriculum that supports the values of honesty, integrity, kindness, and respect for others. Use a variety of security measures to keep intruders and weapons off school grounds. Establish the school as neutral territory for students. Control rumors and squelch loitering and tardiness. Create alternative schools for serious offenders. Provide students and teachers with training in effective communication. What can teachers themselves do to prevent violence and vandalism? Establish a classroom environment centered on respect and kindness, where put-downs, ridicule, and sarcasm are not tolerated. Learn how to diffuse conflict in ways that save face for both students and teachers. Develop intensive skills in classroom management. Use peer counseling or peer meditation to train students to handle problems before they become serious. Involve students in decision-making processes in areas such as finding methods to handle offenders. The encouraging news is that although school violence and vandalism are a serious problem, they affect a relatively small percentage of teachers and students in the public schools. Viewed from a broader perspective, this problem probably reflects as much a societal malice as any particular flaw of schools. Boredom, frustration, alienation, despair, and low self-concept are characters that teenagers may experience in their homes and in society in general, as well as in school. As long as violence prevails in societies, schools will likely be affected. Cheating in schools has become an issue torn from the national headlines. A student watching the news in the evening may see a story about a superintendent indicted for pressuring teachers to change incorrect text scores from student exams, or a news story about college students at an Ivy League college being punished for participating in a cheating scandal. Gone are the days of a student passing a note to another student during a test, or a student tucking a crib sheet up his or her sleeve with the test answers during a test, or a student. It is as if cheating has become ubiquitous in our society. In fact, students may just tell you that. The number of high school students who represent someone else's work as their own has skyrocketed over recent decades. More than half of all high school students admit to cheating in the past year. With grades playing a high-stakes role in students' educational advancement, more and more students find it acceptable to cheat to earn a good grade. In the past, cheating students were most often low-achieving students. Today, high-achieving students are just as likely to cheat in school as low-achieving students. Unfortunately, more and more students report that cheating is acceptable in schools. They report that everyone does it, or I just got a little help. Cheating takes many forms, including text messaging, text answers to another student, plagiarizing by downloading information or entire papers from the internet, copying from another student, or getting test questions and answers from a student in a previous period. Cheating happens in isolation, such as when a student searches for answers to a test question on her or his graphing calculator. Cheating also happens in groups, such as when a group of students texts answers to an assignment to others. Cheating is more prevalent in high schools, yet it is also seen in elementary schools. What can schools and teachers do to discourage cheating? Teachers can establish classroom norms that help combat cheating, such as arranging the classroom so that students cannot physically cheat during independent work. There should be established rules for when it is acceptable to use electronic devices. For example, ensure your assessment tools are clearly aligned with your instruction. Make sure your students understand what cheating is and why it is morally wrong and unacceptable. Talk with your students about the consequences for cheating. Establish an honor system using student input so that students will be invested in the system. Most importantly, institute character education programs that can help students to establish a moral compass. The dropout rate is the lowest it has been since 1974. The high school graduating class of 2012 saw 78% of their membership earn a diploma on time. The graduation rate is up across all ethnic groups, although there is still a gap across ethnic groups. At 93%, Asian American students have the highest percent on-time graduation rate. They are followed by white students with 83% graduation rate. Hispanic students trail with 71%, American Indians at 69%, and African American students with 66% on-time graduation rate. What do these numbers mean to our society and to you as the classroom teacher? High school dropouts are more likely than their classmates who earn a high school degree to be incarcerated and will likely earn less money than their classmates, yet dropout rates are strongly related to income levels. Youth from low-income families are 3 times more likely to drop out than are students from high-income families. Dropout rates are highest in schools with a large proportion of students from low-income families. Besides poverty, what contributes to high school dropout rates? Students report poor grades, dislike for school, alienation from peers, marriage or pregnancy, and employment as common causes for leaving school. The role the family plays in monitoring students in school also plays a role in dropout rates. Students who live with both parents and the parents actively monitor the student's schoolwork are more likely to stay in school. The most commonly reported factor is poor academic performance. Ninth grade serves as a bottleneck for many students who discover that their academic skills are lacking for high school level work. Another cause for dropping out is unrealistic expectations about the world of work. Many students with high hopes and the imagined luxury of a regular income fail to realize that wages in the service sector of employment are low. Other teenagers may envision starting at the bottom of the work hierarchy and through hard work eventually climbing the ladder of success. Unfortunately, many of them lack job search skills and end up in jobs with limited potential for advancement. Despite this reality, the strong motivation to work often proves too powerful an incentive and results in students leaving school. The immediate rewards of the workplace lure some students away from the more remote incentives of staying in school and attaining an education. Students often give warning signs they are at risk for dropping out. For example, increased absences, lethargy in completing work, and preoccupation with matters outside of school. Teachers can discourage students from dropping out by showing interest and care in their students and by talking to and encouraging them. Knowing your students well can help you detect changes in their attitude and work habits. Across the country, initiatives such as dropout recovery programs, career academics, and early college high schools have been put in place to target at-risk students. Across these different initiatives, research shows that more individualized learning environments, supplemental academic support, and engaging instruction were instrumental in student retention. End of chapter 4.